ಮೂರ್ತಿನೇ ಇದ್ದಾನೆ ನೋಟಲ್ಲಿ ಮೂವಿ.
Right?
Yes, sir. Can unmute you.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Dr. S. Vice Chancellor, Rajiv Gandhi University of Health Sciences. Today we are going online for a program which has been in conjunction with the Asian Research and Training Institute for Skill Transfer Artists, of which Dr. Hema Divakar is the CEO and Chairman, and Dr. Divakar is the Managing Director. So program today sponsored by Rajiv Gandhi University of Health Sciences is to see that we train all the master trainers in handling this COVID situation, especially for obstetrics and gynecology, more so in obstetrics care, how to take care of the antenatal problems, how to anticipate issues with antenatal care each trimester, and as well the neonatal issues that arise out of a child born to a COVID positive mother. I think these are the issues that we address. And once master trainers are trained, they will be taken forward, and we should percolate to other obstetricians and gynecologists throughout the state. That is the plan. And to execute this plan, we have responsibility Dr. Hema Divakar, as I mentioned earlier, FIGO COVID Task Force CEO and Chairman, Asian Research and Training Institute for Skill Transfer. She'll be setting the context. And then we have Dr. Shobna Patel, President of Kasoga, starting right protocols for triage and testing. And Dr. Kasturi Donimat, Secretary Kasoga, she'll be talking on need for enforcing infection control practices, how and why. And Dr. Hema Divakar will continue with antepartum, intrapartum, and postpartum handling a non-COVID as well as COVID positive patient. And Dr. Jeev Divakar will wind up with wrap up the whole program. The consultant ophthalmologist and also managing director artist. So with this program designed, let us not waste much time. We are prepared with the program. I'm sure all of you are very eagerly waiting. I'll hand over the podium to Dr. Hema Divakar. Podium here.
Thank you very much, sir. Yellarigu namaskara. First things first. So let me place on records, ladies and gentlemen, my very, very sincere thanks to the Vice Chancellor, Dr. Sachidananda. He traveled faster than the COVID infection with respect to coordinating with our organization to make this happen this afternoon. So we're very eager to touch base with all of you who are truly the frontline COVID warriors who will render the essential services under the list of antenatal, intrapartum, postpartum care and the immunization programs. So the backbone of this are our champions and the master trainers, which means each one of you out there with the Kasoga President, Dr. Shobana Patel, and Dr. Kasturi Donimat, the General Secretary, with whom we had a meeting with all the executive committee members and really brainstormed on how to cascade this training program, how to reach every nook and corner of
our
our state of Karnataka, how to render care for every single women out there with quality, safety, dignity, and respect. For that, once again, I place on records my very humble and sincere thanks to Dr. Sachidananda and the team here from the Rajiv Gandhi University of Health Sciences. And in a cascading manner, one-off or one-time training is not enough. We need to really transfer the skill and shift the tasks in the manner that they should be done. So we are planning a series of programs every afternoon for the teams of the staff of different hospitals
who will
who will sort themselves out to fall in line, redesigning and reshaping
their
their own
maternity
settings,
may it be a small nursing home in a small town
or
obstetric
unit in a huge tertiary care hospital. So let us take you through this journey in the right earnest. And
the
the objectives of this entire program will be you as an obstetrician
who is
going to render the antenatal, interpartum, the postpartum care and the neonatal care. What is it that you need to do? So all the points discussed will be very practical, very feasible, very pragmatic, very doable in your own setting. So kindly reflect on the practices that you have been up to till now and how you need to change your mindset, how you need to change the course of action.
First things first,
as I said, Shobana will open up the presentation with how you will receive the patient right at the entrance of your
small or big
setup,
triaging,
selecting, screening,
and
handling them differently if they so deserve. And next, the presentation following will be by Dr. Kasturi Donimat,
who
will tell you
how you will
organize your outpatient consultation, wards,
operation theater,
ultrasound room, any other area in your own setting, the do's and don'ts related with particular attention to how you will train your staff and the housekeeping staff in particular about the IPC or infection prevention and control practices. Yes, all of us in small nursing homes don't have a great IPC team as such, but you have to identify one or two core people who are responsible for implementing and executing that. Lastly, I will be speaking on the actual process of handling the care and the intra and postpartum in the non-COVID and the COVID patients. With the wrap-up from Dr. Divakar, the Managing Director of Artis, we will then be very eager to take your questions and we will try our earnest best to respond to those queries with the limited knowledge that we have as on date. But kindly do remember that we are getting updates by the minute. And I urge each and every one of you to join hands in this fight against COVID-19 and in this corona crisis, which has brought us all together on this great learning platform. Let us deliver the care to the women and children out there and do our bit of the service that we can. Having said this, once again, the kind attention of this entire team at the Rajiv Gandhi University of Health Sciences, which is not only with the teaching and training programs, with special effects and enforcement in every cadre, may it be a general practice, a pulmonologist, an intensivist, a physician, a pediatrician, and of course the obstetrician who have to render this essential care. We would once again welcome you all to this afternoon's deliberations, and I would urge my panelists to stick to time, 15 minutes each for Dr. Shobana and Dr. Kasturi Donimat, and I will be deliberating for 25 minutes, taking through the
care
care of a non-COVID and a COVID. And the tone will be very simple.
It is not a
It is not a high-fi intensive care that we are talking about because we are not qualified to do that. What role do we play as OBGYNs in a multi-speciality team? And more importantly, when we are left alone by ourselves to handle the patient, what is it that we must pay attention to? That is what will be discussed. I would kindly urge all of you to mute your systems and only let the speaker
move on
without any background disturbance. Kindly send your questions through the chat mode, and this will be for deliberations right at the end of the session. So over to the President of KSOGA, Dr. Shobana Patel, for triaging and testing.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Hema. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes, we can.
Good afternoon, everyone.
We can hear some children in the background, so kindly mute your systems, please.
ಇದು ಓಡಿಸ್ಬೇಡ ಅವಳೆ ಬಿದ್ಕಿದ್ದಾಳ
Good afternoon, everyone. At the outset, I would like to thank Dr. Sachidanand sir, VC of Rajiv Gandhi University, for starting this initiative. And I was, sir, I was also part of your previous webinar and online training program which you conducted. And I think your office is leaving no stone unturned. I must say so. And this is a perfect example of a public-private partnership, I think. And I'll tell you about the Karnataka Society of Obstetric and Gynecological Association, sir. We have members of 3,500, and we are all OBGYNs in different places we are working. And we have 20 societies, sir. And today we have been, we are joined by the president and secretary of each society. It only shows us that, just to tell you that we are in solidarity to show the support in fight against the COVID-19. And we were all actually, in fact, they were all waiting to listen to you, sir. And we are very happy that, we have started this process. And what we are planning to do is, we are planning to train in two ways. One is training of the paramedical people. Another is the training of the doctors. And so what we are planning to do is through the society, and we want to do it, take it across the 20 societies. We'll train the president and the secretary, and the president and the secretary can train the other doctors. So sort of like, training of the trainers. This is the program, that is what we are intending to do. Now let me start with my presentation. So this is how our enemy coronavirus looks. If we may say so, it is a perfect pathogen. It spreads by droplet infection, so it is easily transmissible. It is highly infectious. So the R not, what we call it, is 3. That means if one patient gets infected, one patient is infected, he can infect another 3 people. That is what the contagiousness of any epidemic is calculated by this R naught. So this is highly infectious. The worst part is it can infect even when the patient is asymptomatic, and it can affect anyone. We have seen that it has affected the movie stars and president, prime minister. But when it affects a vulnerable group like advanced age group or people who have comorbidities, it can be more severe. It causes prolonged illness for more than 14 days. It can stay alive on fomites for several hours to days. It is a novel virus, and so we are all immunologically very naive. And so that is again very something. And today, as it stands now, we do not have an effective treatment or vaccination. So I told you already, the modes of transmission is by respiratory droplets. This is very important to understand the modes of transmission, because what are we talking about the PPE? What precautions we have to take for the prevention of this infection is by understanding how it is transmitted. So it is transmitted mainly by 2 ways. One is respiratory droplet, another is fomite transmission. So respiratory droplet is generated when an infected person coughs or sneezes or talks, somewhere within 2 meters. So 2 meters, if you say, or 6 feet, it is all same. So if it's somewhere there, then it can directly enter the mucus in the face, and they can cause infection.
participants kindly mute your systems.
Okay, now if you look at the life of the virus on various surfaces, A is going to be for 3 hours. The copper it is going to be for 4 hours. Cardboard it is 24 hours.
ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದೀನಿ ಮೇಡಮ್ ಅದು
Stainless steel
171 ಪಾರ್ಟಿಸಿಪೆಂಟ್ ಜಾಯ್ನ್ ಆಗಿದೆ
the plastic.
ಒಬ್ಬೊಬ್ಬರಾಗಿ ಲೋಡಿಂಗ್ ಮಾಡಬೇಕು
Why is it important to know? It's important because if we are talking about in the cardboard, if it's for 24 hours, when we think of cardboard, we think of two things comes to our mind. One is our Amazon, second is our pizza. So it is important for us to understand that in the cardboard it can stay for 24 hours. Stainless steel, when we talk, the first thing that comes to our mind is our tiffin box which we take to our clinic, and it can stay on that board 2 to 3 days. Coming to the-
ಹಲೋ ಅಲ್ಲ ನಾನು ಹೇಳೋದು ಕೇಳಿ ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ರೀಸ್ಟಾರ್ಟ್ ಮಾಡಿ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದೆ.
Hello, can I continue, Hema? Hello, Hema, can I continue?
Yes,
Yeah.
please, Shobna.
Yeah. So coming to the clinical symptoms, majority of the patients, they have only mild or moderate cold, flu. So they'll come to us with cough, sore throat, a fever above 37.8 degrees centigrade. A few of them can have a severe problem like shortness of breath, it can be severe acute breathlessness or acute respiratory illness, what we call SARI, pneumonia and marked hypoxia. When critically ill patients, again lesser number, can develop tachypnea if there's a respiratory rate of more than 30, hypoxia of less than, SpO2 is less than 93%. Imaging, if you find that there is more than 50% lung involvement, then we say patients are critically ill. So immunocompromised and in elderly pregnant women, the patient can manifest to us with fatigue, malaise, body ache, nausea, and diarrhea. There's no evidence that pregnant women presents with different signs or symptoms or are at a higher risk of severe illness. Now coming to the COVID-19 preparedness for our healthcare professionals, so all facilities, whether it's a bigger hospital or smaller hospital, should increase their level of preparedness, be alert and responsive to identify, manage, and care for cases of COVID-19. It is very important for us to understand that there are different set of challenges in wherever we are working. Suppose we are working in a bigger hospital and in a district hospital or a tertiary care center, probably we are exposed to COVID-19 patients directly. And then, but however, we also have a support system of an, HR, admin, everything will be available for them. But if you are working in a smaller place, though you may not be directly treating a patient with COVID-19, but still, none of us can say that we are immune to it. We may be exposed to it. Secondly, we also have the burden of looking after the whole center single-handedly. That you are also in a HR, you're also looking after the admin, you're looking after the patients, so you are doing everything. So there are different challenges in different healthcare setting what we work. Now today's talk, I'll restrict myself to a middle segment or a small segment hospital or a nursing home. So that our discussion will go on in that direction. Next. So training of the staff. The training of the staff it is very, very important. Probably it is the most important thing I would say. You may have read a lot of things, and maybe everything is there in the WhatsApp group, but everything is there. But then if you do not train your staff, if you do not tell them like what is we are going to do your own setup, it is not going to be of any use to us. So it is very important that you should have an operational plan post COVID-19 or post lockdown before the return to work after the lockdown. So once you decide that you are going to start full-fledged again, it's very important that you have staff. It is so important. Washing of the hands may be just taken as just a part of cleanliness. So they need to make them understand how important it is as far as preventing the spread of COVID. Infection prevention, obviously we have already told them, but still it's important that we tell them. We must talk to them about the environmental cleaning and disinfections. Identification of symptoms of COVID-19 must be told to them. And we must tell them about the rational and appropriate use of PPE. So it's very important that everybody knows what kind of a PPE they need to wear in which different section of the hospital, and donning and doffing. You may have everything, but if you are not doing your infection control practices are not good, you may have the best of the N95, you may have the full-fledged PPE, but if you do not know how to wear and how to remove it, infection can spread to everyone. So this is the most important part of the clinical management, I would say. Coming to preparedness, like as far as the doctors are concerned, I would say that we must stay alert and well informed, but we should not be anxious and we should not panic that we have to get and see such patients. And we must schedule our appointment in a waiting area to avoid crowding. And it's very important, we have this teleconferencing and video conferencing facility must be made available to, we must make use of this facility because this is an effective and sustainable solution. And this has been endorsed by MCI and Government of India. It can be as replacement or as an add-on, especially if maternal observation or test is not required. And majority of the minor ailments can be treated on the phone itself. It's something like a virtual prenatal care visit. And you could also consult with other specialists like MFM or genetic counselors or mental health care. Everything can be taken care through your video conferencing and teleconferencing. And Kasoga, understanding the importance of this of the healthcare services, we have started an initiative where we are providing the services of this to all Kasoga members through a white collared labeled product, which will be available to your iOS and Android users. And probably at a very, very subsidized rate, we are getting it. And probably in a week or so, all of us will have this application on our phone. So coming to the, as far as infrastructure is concerned, the spacing between the patients, at least a minimum of 1 meter must be there whenever you are near OPD in your reception. It's important that you just maybe may cross it and then say nobody's going to sit in between, or remove the chairs. You do whatever you want to do, but then you make sure that the patients are not sitting next to each other. Remove all the unnecessary items in the rooms. Whatever items are there, remove everything. Keep your windows and door of the clinic open. So don't keep all the doors closed. So every time the many patient comes, they'll open it and then they're all it can again a source of infection. Avoid AC. Ensure facility for hand washing and hand sanitization. Very important. So if you have to inspect your site wherever you are working, make sure that these facilities are there. Hand sanitizer should be made available at the waiting area, entry doors, exit door, and it should be regularly refilled. Biomedical waste bin should be placed in appropriate areas, and keep your PPE gown, gloves, mask, and headgear. Everything has to be made available. Then we as an obstetricians, we are very fond of, all the accessories, what we wear, obviously we must stop all that. We must avoid wearing watches, rings, bangles, dangling earrings, everything. And it is important that our hair is tied and covered with a cap. After each patient examination, we must wash our hands with soap and water or with an alcohol-based sanitizer. And ensure that there is a more frequent surface cleaning of the OPD and waiting areas with sodium hypochlorite solution. Regularly wipe surfaces like desk, table, and objects with the disinfection. All staff must wear a mask, glove, and some eye shield or goggles. If possible, wherever possible, keep only one BP apparatus and stethoscope in use and keep sanitizing them repeatedly. Every time you see a patient, issue a prescription every time. It prevents you from, touching all the bag and baggages. The patients bring the bag and baggages, and then every time you have to open, see, check. So it's definitely the chance of contact will be more with them. And after each examination, the examination table must be cleaned after seeing the patient. As far as the patients are concerned, it's very important for us to tell them that when they take an appointment, preferably if they can afford and if they can come, it's personal transport is better than a public transport. And they could, if they have got a car, and we can tell them you wait in the vehicle if there is a rush there, and then we'll call you in, and then you can come inside. And also patient must be encouraged to wear a mask. It is very important that patient and the patient attender should be encouraged to wear a mask. And best to avoid relatives. We know that when a pregnant patient comes, we have people who are coming from the husband side, we have people coming from the mother side, and then there's a whole jing bang of 6 to 7 people who come. So it is better that when they take an appointment, you must tell the patient that we want only you to come, or otherwise only one person. Probably that person also need not come inside the premises. And this is very important for us to tell all our staff to insist that this is what we follow. Put a lot of posters. All these posters are available in, the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare. Everything is available, and we are going to put it across in Kasoga website also. So you can take a print of, laminate it, and put it everywhere in your hospital. Now coming to the triage area, triage area. What is a triage area? So every hospital, however big or small it is, establish a triage area. It need not be a very big area. Just identify a small place where you are going to. It is just at the entry point and where we are going to segregate the patients. So in this triage area, it is very important, if possible. Otherwise, if you can have a glass or a plastic screen, that will be better, because all the patients directly come in contact with the healthcare worker. So they must don the PPE. That is here. This is the first contact. So they must wear an N95 preferably. Eye protections, gloves and gown they must wear, and they will have the minimum furniture there, and then they will take the history there. And the PPE should be donned and entering the triage area and removed while leaving. It is very important that you must tell your staff that not to wear that and walk around whole hospital and come back and sit there. So they must enter the triage area, wear that. When they're leaving, they must remove. And the infrared thermometer should be available. Triage area also should have a signs and alerts about respiratory etiquette and hand hygiene. Waste bins and access to cleaning, disinfection supplies must be available. In the triage process, when in the process of it, if possible, again I told you we should use either a dedicated or a disposable in stethoscope, blood pressure cuff, and thermometer and all those things. Maybe you can keep in the triage area. In between the patient, it is very important that you clean and disinfect it, and ensure that the healthcare workers do not touch their eyes, nose, and mouth with potentially contaminated gloved or ungloved hand. This is the most common way, that the infection can spread. So it's very important that they don't touch their eyes, nose, and mouth. And then avoid contaminating environmental surfaces that are not directly related to the patient care. Keep wiping this. This has to become a sort of an SOP for you when you run your OPD. Ensure adequate room ventilation. Assign a dedicated clinical staff. So don't go on rotation. Don't put these people on rotation. So it's very difficult to train them and retrain them, and then another group will come and they will not know. So probably we'll train a people and put them in as a dedicated triage area staff only, and you teach them what is revised COVID-19 case definition. You identify the suspect, how to identify the suspected cases, and what are the respiratory symptoms that are present. All this has to be seen. So we need to understand what is the case definition, what is a suspect, who is a suspect. All symptomatic individuals who undertaken international travel in the last 14 days, yes, now international travel has been banned. Probably we can say that if the patient has come from a particular cluster or a hotspot, then we know, we have to be more careful in these people. Or symptomatic contacts of lab confirmed cases, all symptomatic healthcare personnel, all hospitalized patients if they have a acute severe respiratory illness, or asymptomatic direct or high risk contacts of a confirmed case. And the testing should be done once on day 5 and day 14 after contact. So when we say symptomatic, the patient should have fever, cough, and shortness of breath. When we say direct and high risk contact, it means we are talking about the patient who live in the same household with a confirmed case. And then HCP is a direct high risk contact if she has examined a confirmed case without proper personal protection. When do we say it's a confirmed case of COVID-19? A person who has got a lab confirmation of COVID-19 infection, irrespective of the clinical signs and symptoms, we say that is a confirmed case. Now, this is what we need to do. You can see there that the difference between the one patient to another patient, at least there is definitely a gap of 1 meter must be there. And this is how in the triage area that the staff, healthcare worker are going to say. And then they're going to take a history, and I'm going to share with you the screening, what we are going to ask. And then once we take the history, then we screen them. You can have your own indigenous method, because each one of us, our setup is different, the way we practice is different, and where we work is different. So in our own setup, we need to have this system. And so what do? They go through a questionnaire where we look at the signs and symptoms, travel history, and history of contact with a confirmed or a suspect COVID-19 case. So the first point, what will you ask? Any patient with the following, as I told earlier, this is something which we have to have it ingrained in our brain. Any patient who has got fever of more than 38 degrees, has got cough, difficulty in breathing, or shortness of breath. Sometimes the patient can also come with gastrointestinal symptoms, or if there is a history of exposure, as told by me earlier, then this is the patient. This is the first thing which you are going to ask. And also ask like if the patient has come from, it's very important if she may say a healthcare worker and she may be working in a small hospital or she may be working in a COVID dedicated hospital. So I think this important history is very important. You must spend little more time and finding out from where the patient has come, what problem she has got. And then probably this triage will be much more successful. So this is a form which we are going to use, which we are going to share with all of you during your training program, and we are going to ask about the traveler contact symptoms and also ask about any comorbidities like diabetes, hypertension, heart disease, asthma. If anything of these are present, that has to be entered. So suppose you're done a triage and you're doing a triage, and if you find that the patient has got a respiratory symptoms, so what will you do? That's a question that comes. You have put somebody and the patient, you have taken the history, and then the patient says that she has got respiratory symptoms. So what do you do? Immediately, if she is not having a face mask, please give a face mask to her. If face masks are not available, at least a tissue paper or that scarf or a cloth or something, she must cover her face. And follow the triage protocol, whatever you have written, and immediately isolate a separate patients at a high risk for COVID-19. You put them away as he may be a high risk for COVID-19. What do? You are sitting in a room where you are triaging, you are taking the history. If you please identify another small room, okay, and there you are going to shift the patient, shift her there and say, okay, now she comes as a high risk for COVID-19. Isolate in a room. Suppose you are working in a tertiary care center or a COVID dedicated hospital, probably you will have a respiratory waiting areas or fever clinic, and then probably this most important thing is you shift the patient from the routine. All the patients, if the patient has got a respiratory symptom, move her away from there. Okay, and then any suspected COVID-19, you have to inform the district surveillance officer. So this is screen at the entrance to the hospital. So if the patient, if the history by screening, if she is negative, so if she is negative, what will happen? The routine precautions, whatever you're taking, that must be conducted. Hand hygiene, keeping the distance, and then she will proceed to a reception, and she'll continue with the services. Suppose she's screen positive. Suppose she comes as screen positive, as already I told you. So these are the patients, the team, you have to segregate her, you find out about the comorbidity, and then the patient has to be seen by a person who is dedicated to that particular area only, and then you have to contact. Don't make her wait in the hospital for a longer time, and consider testing for COVID-19 if it meets the criteria, and which you will not be doing it. The district surveillance officer, where you are contacted or you're sending the patient, those are the people who will be doing it. Next. So what do you do when a positive COVID-19 patient is identified in a healthcare facility not designated as COVID-19 facility? So patient comes, you are sitting in your nursing home and you get a positive patient. Okay, so what do? You do not know. She has got tested somewhere. She had pains, liver pains, and she just landed up in your hospital because she had labor pain and she came as an emergency to your hospital. So what do? So first thing is, of course, obviously you will be examining her and find out whether she's in an emergency of second stage of labor, or you need to deliver immediately. If nothing like that is there, then please inform the local health authorities about the case. First thing you must do is inform the local health authorities about the case, assessing the clinical status before you refer the patient to designated COVID facility. Again, this is very important. The moment you find they are positive or suspect, shift them to another room. And if they are already in the shared ward or room, shift them out, give a single room for them. Patient should be masked, and only dedicated healthcare worker with a full PPE should attend this case while taking all the due precautions, and transfer her as early as possible to a dedicated COVID-19 center or hospital. And when you are transferring the patient, please inform the facility wherever you are sending about that you are transferring this patient. She is a COVID-19 patient and this is what her condition is. And please ring up and talk to them, and then shift the patient. And complete case records of such patient must be made available to in the hospital. After you send the patient out, now in your hospital, you have to when you are transporting the patient, you have to take appropriate standard precautions. And what you do in your hospital is you have to undergo all the disinfection process of the facility, and the ambulance is very important. Then all the contacts of this patient, if there has been any contact of this patient, it's very important that that you should be quarantined and followed up for 14 days, and the details, everything must be shared with the local health authorities. All close contacts of the confirmed case should be put on hydroxychloroquine chemoprophylaxis for a period of 7 weeks, keeping in mind the contraindications of HCQ. So when a suspect or a confirmed COVID-19 is identified, if you identify a healthcare worker, if your worker is there and if you think that he could be having a suspect, he could be a suspect or will confirm case, what do you do? Obviously, like you don't want her to work. What we should, if she develops a respiratory symptoms like this, you must immediately act. She should be put on a mask. Obviously, she should be wearing a mask at this stage because she's a healthcare worker. She's in the hospital, and she should be isolated. Arrangement must be made to immediately refer to an COVID-19 designated hospital for isolation and for management. Now coming to the another aspect of my presentation, what is the testing criteria, which is very controversial in the sense, like, a lot of debates and discussion goes on when to test, how to test, and what to test. And so what I have done is I've taken all the latest. So one thing we must understand is all the testing must be done as per our ICMR guidelines and Ministry of Health and Family Welfare. So this is the only thing very important that you must understand. You cannot take from guideline or a European guidelines, or you can't take from American guidelines and say this is what they are doing. We are also going to do the same, because your testing depends upon your condition of the country at that time, and particularly if in your area wherever is there, whatever clusters you are seeing. So the government will give a guideline based on that, and we have to follow that. And also another important thing is this has to be reviewed and updated, and they are going to review it and update it periodically. If you can see here, this testing criteria by ICMR has been updated on 9th, 16th, and 20th. If you are not aware of it, and if without knowing, and then when you do a WhatsApp forward and you are sending at 9th, testing criteria on 20th or something else, this causes lots and lots of confusion. I'll appeal to all of you that when you forward anything, please make sure the authenticity of that whatever you are sending. Also make sure of the date what it has been sent. Is this, and please go to the ICMR website, go to Ministry of Health and Family Welfare website. Everything has been updated there. Go there and then check it authenticity, and then you please share the knowledge. So when this testing, what are the testing criteria?
No.
So all symptomatic individuals who are undertaken international travel in the last 14 days, this is what has been given as the testing criteria for these people. All patients with SARI, all symptomatic contacts of lab confirmed cases, asymptomatic direct and high risk contact of confirmed case, and which should be done in between 5th and 14th day, and all symptomatic
3 minutes telling you.
healthcare workers. So these are the criteria. Now recently on 20th of April, ICMR has put the strategy for the COVID-19 testing for pregnant women in India. See that it's very important that each and every word we understand, and then you follow accordingly. It has been told that testing for pregnant women should be done as per ICMR testing strategy. Pregnant women who are residing in clusters or containment area or in large migration center from hotspot district, presenting in labor or likely to deliver in the next 5 days should be tested, even if it is asymptomatic. So we should not take a part of it and then try to understand it. Let us understand in the context of in the cluster, if there is a pregnant lady and if you want to if she's going to deliver her, even if she's asymptomatic, these are the pregnant women which we must test. And here they have not mentioned whether you talk about RT in this notice and circular. They have not told whether it is by RT-PCR or we are going to do a rapid antibody test. And we need to understand that the real-time PCR, RT-PCR is the only recommended gold standard test for diagnosis of COVID-19 and should be done among individuals belonging to the category, as I've already mentioned in the ICMR guidelines, only those category of people it has to be done. And also we must remember, this should be done only in areas which has been approved by Government of India. So we cannot send anywhere and everywhere. And it is very important for us to understand that if you go to the ICMR link and, and if you try to find out which are the labs that they are authorized or, that they can do. And of course, initially it was very less number of labs were there. Now we have a lot many more labs are there. So we have to make sure that these are the labs only which we can send. Additional antibody testing in hotspot. This is like an antibody testing, rapid test, what we're talking about. So what were the criteria that has been given? If they have a symptom like that, if it's less than 7 days, do an RT-PCR only. If it is more than 7 days, you can do a rapid antibody test. Positive if it is present, you quarantine her for at least next 7 days. And if it's negative, advise her to continue quarantine for next 7 days as you are in the hotspot. And if clinical suspicion is there, then you do the RT-PCR testing. And this is an antibody test which has been given by ICMR in 17th April. So what is the role of rapid antibody test? And he has very clearly, they have told gold standard is real-time PCR, RT-PCR only. Rapid antibody test cannot replace the frontline test. So rapid antibody test is a supplementary tool, okay, and it should be only be utility. Utility will be there only after minimum of 7 days of onset of symptoms, and definitely it is emerging and it is useful for epidemiological studies and surveillance purpose. This test has to be done under strict medical supervision. Only in those places where it has been identified by Government of India, Government of Karnataka, then there only we should be able to do. Obviously, we are looking forward for this rapid test because we want more and more number of women, when they come for pregnancy and labor, we want this test to be available to all of us, so that all the definitely it makes a huge big milestone. It will be for management of pregnant women. So I think this is my last slide. I just want to tell that, see, whenever you are talking about the testing of COVID-19, it has to be done by a trained healthcare professional only. This nasal and throat swab samples, there are people who have been trained, identified, and those are the people who are qualified enough to collect it, to transport it a cold chain, and they should follow the standard national infection control guidelines. And as I told you, there are all private and government labs up there, which has been, go to the link of ICMR and you'll know whether, it is, which are the labs that are available, then you can get it done. Then the rapid antibody test, as I understand now, I think it has not yet come to Karnataka. That's what the evidence says. I do not know. Sachidanand sir must be able to throw some light on that. It's not available as of now in Karnataka, and it has to be approved by ICMR and approved by DCGI. And I think right now, whatever the lot has got, there is a little problem, and they're all working on it. And once we are through with that, probably we'll have an answer. And it's too early for us to tell now, as of now, what should be done. In order to ensure that all such cases are monitored and necessary action is taken, what the details of the test result has to be uploaded in ICMR portal. All organizations are duty bound to register themselves to ICMR portal and upload the data in real time. And suppose you do not do that, and you cannot randomly go on doing it without following the rules and regulations what is given by Government of India and Government of Karnataka, we are failure to do that. If you do so something like that, we are able to action under Disaster Management Act of 2005. I think this is all I have to tell. I think let's all join hands together and fight against this coronavirus. And I'm really thankful for all the members of the president and secretaries and all the other key people who have come online and here with us today. And I'm sure together we can definitely do wonders in Karnataka and make Karnataka as a role model for the OBG management here. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Shobna.
Thank you, Dr. Shobna. I think under your able leadership, Kasoga will not only reach greater heights, but also reach greater depths in percolating to the nooks and corners of this state to do our best for maternal and child health care. So after having recognized there's so much modification that you need to do in your own settings, big or small, most of all, the change of mindset, the flexibility to reorganize, redesign, and reshape the care that you are offering to the patients. Let us now see from Dr. Kasturi Donimat, the General Secretary of Kasoga, who will tell us how different parts of the nursing homes and institutions, big hospitals have to be organized in keeping with the IPC or infection prevention and control practices, which are very, very, very crucial to break the chain of the coronavirus. So over to Dr. Kasturi Donimat.
Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I would like to thank our Vice Chancellor, Dr. Sachidanand sir, and Artist Chairman, Dr. Hema Devaka Madam, and our Kasoga President, Dr. Shobna Patel Madam, for giving me this opportunity. Today, I'll be talking on the infection spreading prevention. So, as all of us know, for this virus to remain and spread, this link has to continue between the infectious agent, the reservoir, the port of exit, entry, and the host. So our main aim here is to break this link. If we break this link, then we can stop this disease transmission. we as doctors and healthcare providers, we doctors, nurses, class 4 servants, everything, we play a very, very important role. Am I audible?
You're very much audible. There are some people who are still joining in and they have not muted their system. So kindly, once again, I urge all of you to mute yourself and let Dr. Kasturi carry on.
Go ahead,
Go ahead, Kasturi.
Good afternoon, everyone. Am I audible?
Yes, please
Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah. So we as healthcare providers, we play an important role in breaking this chain of spread, either as a doctor, a nurse, or any health class 4 servant. So it is very important that we break this chain of transmission and reduce the spread to this disease. So this goes a long way in protecting ourselves, our patients, our family, community, and environment at large.
She said break the chain, so I'm sorry, Kasturi, to break the chain of your thoughts
Yet again.
Okay.
Kindly
Please
come close to the laptop mic because we need your volume a little more louder. Thank you.
Okay, I
Needs to leave. It's okay, I think.
okay. Am I audible now?
Yes.
Okay. So the important elements in the standard precautions to prevent this infection is, one is hand hygiene, other is respiratory hygiene, PPE, and other safe handling of all the materials which we use, like injections, sharps, any instruments, equipments, and environment cleaning and handling that. And last but not the least is biomedical waste. So we'll deal with this item. So first of all, hand hygiene. As our hand is the most important one, which is the main key link for this chain of transmission. So to break this chain, hand hygiene it's the most important. So how to maintain this hand hygiene?
Again, Kasturi, we've lost your voice.
Speaking.
Dr. Kasturi. Dr. Kasturi, we can't hear you.
Things. One is with soap and water. So soap and water, the hand has to be washed for 40 to 60 seconds, and all 6 movements has to be done. All the surfaces have to be cleaned and rubbed. In case there is not availability of soap and water, you can use alcohol-based hand rub. That can be used for 20 to 30 seconds. Especially if your hand is soiled with some contaminated matter or some proteinaceous material, then compulsorily you should use soap and running water and use single towel, and that too disposable. And the other, next to hand hygiene, the most important thing is using mask. Everybody is confused who is to use, who should not use. So any individual who is having respiratory symptoms should wear a medical mask, especially when they are waiting in a triage area or in a waiting area, or where they are waiting due for the transportation to the facility, or within the facility also during transportation, they should wear. Only when they are transferred to their isolated single room, then maybe, but still if they cough or sneeze, they should use disposable paper tissues. All healthcare providers should wear a medical mask whenever they are providing care to the patient. And especially if you are performing procedures where there will be aerosol generation, then you should use a respirator N95 mask or 2 or 3 layers mask. Then how do you manage this mask? This mask has to be properly worn, not just wearing it for the sake of wearing. You should properly wear it. You should fully cover the mouth, nose, and tie securely to minimize there should not be any gap between the face and the mask. So that is very, very important. Then while removing also, you should be very careful. You should remove without touching the mask. you should remove from back. Do not touch the front, but remove the lace from behind. And first remove the lower one, then remove the upper lace. Then while removing, in case if you have touched the front of the mask, immediately you should put this hand rub or wash it with soap and water. And you have to replace this mask as and you should not reuse this face mask. Discard you should discard them immediately in a closed bin with a proper as per the biomedical waste. And regarding, many people are asking about reusing of this N95 mask because they are not available and expensive. So now the recommendation is only plasma sterilization can be done by vaporized hydrogen peroxide. And the person who does, when we are sending for plasma sterilization, also you should take due care that it is nicely packed and all. And the person performing that plasma sterilization also has to wear full PPE when they are doing the plasma sterilization. Some of these methods which we were using are not recommended now, like ethylene oxide, ionizing radiation, because this will damage the filter.
Dr. Kasturi, we've lost your voice again. I think the internet bandwidth at your end is like really of a very low frequency. Yeah, she's talking about the respiratory hygiene etiquette. And every time Amitabh Bachchan comes on the television to tell you how to cover your nose and mouth, either with the tissue or with the elbow of your hand, it has a particular meaning behind it because the tissue should be thrown into the dustbin
hand
with the
hygiene
cover closed.
After contact with respiratory secretions and contaminated objects and materials. In absence of tissue or handkerchief, you should cover your nose and mouth with the arm flexed with the elbows. You should cover it, and you should not spit here and there. That we have to teach the patients. Next, coming to the personal protective measures, PP is the most important thing which prevents the infection from the patient to the healthcare providers. So PP contains all this face mask, N95, face shield, goggles, gown, apron, gloves, head cover, shoe cover, which all of you know. And the main principles for use of PP is always perform hand hygiene before and after wearing PP. PP should be available where and when indicated in plenty of quantity according to the risk. And it should be important, it should be of a correct size. And always put PP on before contact with the patient. Remove PP immediately after completing the task and leave the patient care area. Never reuse the disposable PP. Change PP immediately if it becomes soiled or contaminated. PP should not be adjusted or touched during patient care. Never touch your face while wearing PPE. If there is a concern or breach of these practices, in any case, leave the patient care area whenever it is safe to do so, and properly remove and change the PPE. And always remove PPE. Remove carefully to avoid self-contamination, and it should be removed from dirty area to the cleanest area. So this is the sequence how it is donning is done and doffing is done. Like first gown, mask and respirator, goggles, and last the gloves. So it in a reverse way it is doffing is done. So I will not go into the details of this because we will be showing the video of donning and doffing the PPE. And even in the area, the donning area should be different and doffing. The entry to the donning area is different and exit from the doffing area. We should not mix both. The same entrance should not be there for donning and doffing area. They should have separate entry and separate exit away from the patient care area. Next, coming to very important environmental decontamination. As we know that COVID-19 virus can potentially survive in the environment for several days and hours. So this, the premises and the areas which are potentially contaminated with the virus to be cleaned before their reuse. It is very important. And products containing antimicrobial agents known to be effective against coronavirus may be used. So in housekeeping surfaces, there are two types of groups of surfaces. Those with minimal hand contact like floors and ceilings, and those with very high contact with the hands. That is high.
Every time
some areas of the hospital are cleaned,
looks like Kasturi is taking a break. Every 2 to 3 hours,
anywhere and everywhere you look, you can just quite imagine that the coronavirus may be just lodged there, staying there for hours together. So the housekeeping becomes one of the key members of the infection prevention and control teams to do the cleaning at very regular intervals on all surfaces.
The
The cleaning and disinfection of medical equipment, well as the Indian Jugaad goes, there are many novel ways. They say you cover the patient's arm with a newspaper, for example, and then tie the BP cup over there so that you can just discard the newspaper. Similarly, for using the weighing machine, you just will spread a piece of paper there and let the patient stand on the machine, and when she climbs out of the machine, just discard the paper. The repeated cleaning, of course, is absolutely needed for the bedding, struggles, clothes, etc. So, Kasturi, can you just again come close to your laptop mic and speak, please?
Yes,
Yeah,
The biomedical way.
Yeah.
This person also should be.
Can you go to the next slide?
she's not able to hear.
No.
She's following her own rhythm. She's continuously talking. She's not recognizing. Not getting
COVID-19 waste.
So this is
a real change of behavior for the
housekeeping
staff, and there needs to be some task master
right behind them,
hounding them to do the meticulous cleaning before the patient enters any room. All the beds, all the surrounding surfaces needs to be
cleared as well.
Right? Fully done.
We are losing
Kasturi
Kasturi
on and off, so I'm just continuing with the materials that you shared with you.
Assigned clean should wear full PPE, wear gloves and other personal protective equipment. Most organic waste will be removed with the absorbent material, and surface should be cleaned to the residual organic matter.
The preparation of a simple bleach solution, the 1% sodium hypochlorite, that is what is recommended for cleaning most of the surfaces, and
that's also used
for spraying of all the outpatient areas where every 2 to 3 hours this cleaning is absolutely mandatory.
In the OT
areas, you need to make sure that the PPEs are available, the gown, mask, eye shield, and the hand scrubs. All the aerosol generating procedures have to be performed after wearing the appropriate PPE, including an N95 mask. Only the essential staff to be present in the OT during a procedure. Separate area for donning and doffing. Yes, it is of a concern, because while you're asked to change, you cannot change so much of your infrastructure overnight. So try and be as meticulous as possible for the areas of entry and exit. The hand washing facility and hand sanitizer, please make it available in all of these areas
And
all the time.
There has
to be a checklist. If you can just paste this checklist in 3 or 4 prominent areas in your setting.
So this for each patient, the table, chairs, everything should be one. For each patient.
Now you can tell.
1% sodium hypochlorite, and the examination bed cover should be changed. The room should be mopped with 1% sodium every 2 hours, and high-touch surface area should be cleaned every 2 hours with 1% sodium. And all the toilet floor, sink, shower, soap dispensers, shop, commode should be cleaned with sodium hypochlorite solution and soap and detergent wherever you are handling the COVID positive patients. And once you reach home, you should have a tap outside or a bucket full of water outside. You should wash your hands and then
This is
get
a
your meals.
very, very important practical point which we want you to bring home to all the healthcare providers. The slide that was just showcased was what does the health provider do after she goes home?
She needs to
Wash her hands thoroughly. She needs to change her clothes, take a shower,
clean
clean her clothes, and wash them and put it for drying in the sunlight.
She needs to
She needs to be careful about the elders in her own house or her little children because healthcare providers are indeed the hot spot of carrying the infection. So you need to be very practical, pragmatic and cautious about bringing this to their notice so that these simple things will go a long way in breaking the chain of the COVID-19 virus. Thank you very, very much, Dr. Kasturi Thonimar. With all the interruptions, I think
it symbolizes and signifies
the interruptions in our practice as
So
well.
now we
So now we
display
display a
short
short video.
However,
Much explained, the donning and doffing of
the PPE
PPE can be quite a challenge.
Whilst we play
Whilst
the
we play the
video
video
in the
Uh-huh.
next
in
2
the
minutes,
next 2 minutes,
we
we would want you to quickly note your questions on the chat box
so that in the
intervening time before I begin my presentation,
the
the
time
available to you,
which will show
that
removing all the jewelry before donning,
washing
washing
hands,
wearing the
shoe cover
after being
seated,
one shoe
one
cover
shoe
after
cover
another,
after another,
one
one
part
part of your body is set,
again
again
hands.
wash your hands,
wear the first
wear
pair
the
of
first
glove,
pair of glove,
after which you will pick up in the order,
that was mentioned by
Kasturi,
Kasturi, the gown.
After wearing
the gown, kindly everybody mute their systems, please.
After wearing the
gown is the time to wear
the
the
mask,
mask
N95
N95 or any other mask provided by the setup,
then
then
the goggles,
because
because protecting the
protecting
eyes,
the eyes, nose and mouth is
really
really important.
The face
The
shield,
face shield
so that
that the
blood and serum
blood and serum doesn't flash.
The second
second
pair
pair
of glove, and
now
now
you're
you're
all set
with the
with
PPE
the
that is
PPE that is required
to
to
handle the cases.
Doffing of the PPE.
This again
This
is a
again
process.
is a process.
First, wash your
Because
hands.
wash your hands. First,
Remove
remove
the shoe.
the shoe. Disinfect
Again
and
remove the
remove the first pair of gloves.
Disinfect
your hand again and remove the gown.
After
After
removing
removing
the gown,
the
please touch
gown,
only the
please
inside
touch
of
only
the gown,
the inside of the gown and
roll
slowly
it
roll
as shown here.
as shown
and
here.
each
And
of these
each has to be discarded in a closed dustbin.
Remove the face
Remove the face shield after bending your face down because
That's the way
you
doff.
doff.
Again,
Again,
disinfect your hands.
disinfect your hand,
Goggles.
remove the goggles,
And
and
the next
the
process
next process is
needless to
say the disinfection and removing the
mask
mask
and
and
only
handling
the
the strings of the mask,
bending your
bending
face
your face
forward.
forward.
Each of
These
these
processes will be taught to all your staff nurses in our afternoon
The
classes.
last pair
The
of
last
gloves
pair of gloves
thus
removed
goes back
goes
into
back into
the
the
dustbin,
dustbin,
which is
which is to
closed.
be closed.
Another
little video that we want to play is about the hand washing.
All of them
All of them who have taken
the
the
Manyata
Manyata course
know
know very well
that
that the hand washing is
in an acronym
called SUMANG.
There's the
Just the questions which will be on the chat box and we will take it for deliberation right at the end of.
Steps of hand washing.
Yeah.
Everybody mute their
Everybody
systems,
mute their
please.
systems, please.
Sumang, S
SUMANG,
for
S
Sita,
for Sida,
U for
U
Ulta,
for Ulta,
M for
M
Mutti,
for Mutti,
A for
A for
Anguta, each of
Anguta,
your
each of your
fingers
fingers to be washed,
N
N
for
for
nails,
nails,
and K
and
for
K
Kalai.
for Kalai.
S-U-M-A-N-K.
S-U-M-A-N-K.
That's a small
That's a small acronym that we use in all our programs.
S-U-M-A-N-K
S-U-M-A-N-K is
Sida,
Sida, Ulta,
Anguta,
Anguta,
and
and alive.
We will now
move on to the
final presentation
by myself.
Yet again, for those who have joined us late, we welcome you and bring home certain key points for referral in your practice. The President of Kasoga, Dr. Shobna, spoke about the triaging right at the entrance of your institute or a nursing home. Moving forward was the triaging with a particular set of questions that were to be asked and isolate the patient if you suspect and needing a test. Then walking into the rest of the premises, how each area, whether it is the outpatient, consulting room, operation theatre, ward, etc., has to be organized and the infection control practices to be executed. That was what was laid out by Dr. Kasturi Donimat, the Secretary of Kasoga. Well, now we come to the mainstay. How do you manage these patients? What are the practice protocols? The objective of this deliberation is indeed to build up the competency of each one of us as the OBGYNs, either in the public or private hospitals, to study the impact of COVID-19 infection on the mother and child, on the precautions by the healthcare providers like ourselves and our staff while rendering these essential services of antenatal care, delivery and immunization, on redesigning the structure to follow the social distancing and hand washing, which should constantly stick in your mind again and again and again at each and every step, and the meticulous implementation of the infection control practices. And coming to the mainstay of my talk, what are the protocols of clinical management of mild, moderate, severe cases of COVID-19? So to move right from the start, I would once again like to emphasize that new information is becoming available on a daily or an hourly basis. And kindly update yourself. We will be making our best attempts. The Artists for the Asian Research and Training Institute of Skill Transfer is tied up with several organizations in collaboration, and the resource updates are tremendous, and we will be filtering and reaching you as early as possible on the platforms that we can connect with. In general, men and women are equally prone to get COVID-19 infection. Women are as prone as in general population as the men. But pregnancy is a special situation. Maybe there is increased risk because the immune system, the cardiorespiratory system in pregnancy may be somewhat compromised. The good news is that reported cases of COVID-19 pneumonia in pregnancy are usually milder and they recover very, very well. It's after all a fight between the COVID virus and your immune system. So it's some knowledge full of common sense. If the patient is anemic, if she is malnourished, she is bound to have lower immunity in addition to the pregnancy as a risk factor, and she cannot fight as hard as her friend would have fought this menace of COVID. Similarly, pregnant women with heart disease, either congenital or acquired, pregnant women with gestational diabetes mellitus, millions of them in our country, and the hypertensive disorders, all of these, as you can very well guess, will reduce their ability to fight this infection. So they are a special category which we have to perceive as being at a high risk. So the management recommendations largely we go by the Department of Health and Research, ICMR, and the Ministry of Maternal Health and Family Welfare, Government of India. Our parent organization, FOXY, has brought in some excellent guidelines. IntelliHealth app is a constant update. The Safe Delivery app, those of whom you have, just 48 hours ago, they have added another module on COVID-19. COVID Action Collab brings together all the international organizations be on a common page, because just remember that this disease is not even 3 to 4 months old, and everybody needs to collaborate to have the data collated for better understanding.
As
As
far as our knowledge
goes,
the
the
pregnant women,
just because of the COVID infection,
there's no
there's
data
no data
suggesting
suggesting that there's increased risk of
miscarriage,
miscarriage,
no birth defects,
and there is no need to undergo a pregnancy termination just because you have a COVID infection. Whereas pregnancy termination for other reasons and contraceptive practices can move on as usual. This is the data as far as we have now. The most frequently asked question is, will this transmit from the mother to the child? With regard to vertical transmission,
slowly
we are changing. The first series of 36 cases from China said
no
no evidence that
the
the placenta was
having
having the COVID-19 virus.
So
So
unlikely
unlikely
that
that
it is
it is transmitted
in the womb.
womb.
So
we all said that
this
this is
not
not
having
having a
transfer of
vertical transmission.
But now
Thylassemia is saying that it's probable that there may be vertical transmission, because there are some reports saying that the baby's blood, the neonatal blood, is carrying the antibodies, which means that it may have been infected in utero. The final word on this has not been said yet, but there are no gross defects, no need for us to get unduly alarmed about this. There's no recorded cases of COVID-19 being present either in the vaginal secretions or the breast milk. The do's and don'ts for obstetric care providers in this pandemic.
The first
The
point
first
to
point to do is please check each and every patient and each and every healthcare worker.
And just like
And
how we say in ectopic pregnancy, your degree of suspicion
will be
very
very high.
At the
At the
slightest drop of a hat,
you must know that
he
he is a suspect.
He has to be
He has to be
sent
sent for
testing.
testing.
And
Until the test reports are available,
she should be
she should be treated
as though
as
she
though
was a
she was a
confirmed case of
confirmed case of
COVID-19.
COVID-19.
Which means
Which means
if you're not
testing also, unless otherwise proven,
any
any patient
has to be treated
as a COVID positive.
The
The routine throat scans and some things which can be deferred, please defer it.
But
But
if
you have to intervene and do an obstetric management. Do not delay just because you cannot order for a test, or there is no facility, or you haven't yet got the test reports. You cannot delay for that reason.
Elective
Elective procedures,
rushing
rushing ahead to induce a patient, etc.,
which are
simply not necessary. Please don't venture into this. That's the guidance that is given.
About
About the testing,
we have
we have
an
an acronym called
TOCC.
TOCC.
T is
T is history of travel.
If
If
Nanjangud
Nanjangud is a hotspot and
the
the
patient is
patient is coming from
Bangalore,
Bangalore, as how it was evidenced as
couple of
couple of days ago in the headlines in the newspaper.
He has
He has come from a hotspot.
He has
He has traveled not internationally but locally. He deserves a testing. That's the T.
O is the
O is the occupation. A healthcare worker providing healthcare in some other small setup has been exposed to COVID positive,
has run
has
away
run around from
that
that unit and
lands up
in your place. Please ask the history of the healthcare provider and ask if she was in contact with any COVID positive where she was working or where she is working.
The
The C and C is contact and cluster, and
given the
most recent advisory as defined by
as
Shobana, as outlined by her, any patient who is asymptomatic or symptomatic
who is
who is at term 39 weeks or more and already presented in labor needs the testing. So testing is becoming
a
a very
prominent
prominent and a
huge
huge place it is occupying in our minds, and how to move ahead with the RT-PCR testing.
in
Millions of women who are due to deliver is a big question mark that is haunting us as of today.
Moving back to
what we do with our routine patients who are at home and ringing repeatedly as to when they should visit us for the antenatal checkup.
routine
Antenatal care, please
ask
them to move out of their house only if necessary.
12
12-week scan
with
with the
the
NT,
the 20
the 20-week scan with the anomaly, one more visit closer to her dates
are
are perhaps
the
the
only
only
mandatory
mandatory visits.
visits.
In between, you will see
it
it is written, phone call or video consultation, again phone call, video consultation, anytime with the chat box. Please use the technology to the maximum. The KSOG is also going a huge step ahead in facilitating this by a novel app that they are bringing about, which will enable you to connect with your patient. An individual practitioner will have an individual group of their own patients to connect with, so it's not a mixed up platform. So maximize the use of telehealth across as many aspects of prenatal care as possible. Antenatal care, we've said tailor to the minimum. Please ask her to keep the fetal kit count, and for those women who are self-quarantined, because somebody in their household has possible symptoms or tested positive, the appointment should definitely be delayed for 14 days.
When the woman
When the woman
calls,
calls,
she says
she
that
says that she's not feeling too well and looks like she's having a bit of a fever or a flu-like symptoms. Please defer her visit for 7 days from the start of the symptom. It may just be a flu which will settle down. If the symptoms enhance or persist, then she must visit the setup.
You will see
You
over
will see
here
over here
the
the telecall or a video call by a patient. This is one of the easiest way that the patient can check before coming to the hospital whether she needs to come or not. So this point should reach each one's doorstep, and the mobile connectivity has to be exploited to the maximum. And
if
if the woman has previously tested negative,
again she
comes to your doorstep
with the
symptoms, or we have operated on her, and now she's getting into a fever and
breathing
difficulty, and you're
thinking
thinking and likely
that she
that
may
she
be
may be now
getting
getting into a
COVID-19
COVID-19 infection,
then you
have to handle her with the minimal PPE. As Shobna said, put her in a single room. But please remember to always
maintain
maintain the hand hygiene, the gown, the mask, the goggles, and everything that goes with the minimal PPE that you must don before
checking
this patient.
The service
The service providers
can
can
just check
just
on
check
the
on
patient.
the patient.
If she
If
just has
she
very,
just has
mild
very
symptoms,
mild symptoms,
can she
can she
go back
go back
home
home and isolate herself?
It
It depends on whether she's in a metro, whether she is educated and compliant, and you can make a call to her every single day to find out if she is stable or she is worsening. This is the mild category. Alternately,
the situation,
the situation is obviously not same all throughout the country. If there are
patients from the
patients from the
slums
slums or small households where she definitely cannot even think of self-isolation or a quarantine, she should be admitted in a hospital or a quarantine facility.
The period
The period is listed as 14 days. If she's tested positive today, but you recognize that she has seen you last week for her routine antenatal checkup, then all your service providing staff has to self-quarantine as well. The ideal situation to do an antenatal testing in a asymptomatic or a mild patient whom you are not planning to transfer to another facility. Ideally, it should be a negative pressure isolation room, and the human traffic should be minimal, and all medical staff should wear the PPE while seeing her.
You may
need to
take
consent
consent
for a
test
test
radiography,
radiography, especially the CT scan,
because you need to see
how much
she
she is
progressing
in the
disease.
use of an abdominal shield is a must.
So when you
So
have
when you have
applied
applied the DOCC, travel occupation contact and cluster, you tested her based on the new criteria that she is close to term or she is from the cluster area when she's presented in labor, and she reports to be COVID positive. Then you're left with three different situations.
She may
She may be in the mild category
or
or moderate
or very
or
severe.
very severe.
Mild
ones
have
no symptoms or very little symptoms.
Just pass it
Just
on.
pass it on.
Pass it off.
And
As I said
before,
either
either home or hospital quarantine, depending on
the
the situation that she lives in, the
the
moderate group of symptoms that you've confirmed by chest X-ray, you've done some blood workup, and oxygen saturation is not up to the mark, and you monitored her vitals and respiratory distress is setting in. She is in the moderate category and she needs more care.
very
Very severe ones, of course, it is
to be
to be
handled
handled
with our
with our
networking
with the intensive care specialist.
So what has
the
country
country
for
done
these
for these three
of
category of cases?
There is a whole
There is a whole variety of COVID care centers.
These
These
are
are
mild
for
cases.
mild cases.
It's
It's essentially a temporary makeshift hospital facility, a hotel, a hostel, a guest house, a stadium,
which is
which is situated close to the COVID-19 hospital.
So
So the quarantining is ideal here because
you can
you can monitor the patient 24 by 7, and
really
really she also should not get in touch with the other members in her home.
So
this is one of the best situations in the COVID positive mild cases.
What if she's
What if it's a
case?
moderate case?
The
The isolation beds with oxygen support is needed for these. There is a radiological evidence of pneumonia, so you know that she is a little bit higher grade in your thinking, that she needs a little more care. So huge hospitals today
have a
have a dedicated floor or a dedicated wing where these cases are isolated and monitored. So these are called the COVID health centers. As against the COVID care hospitals, these are the COVID health centers where the moderate cases will go.
Well, if she turns into a severe case,
unfortunately,
especially
this can happen with cardiac disease,
hypertension,
and gestation diabetes. They will go into a dedicated COVID hospital where many things will have to be done for her. So designated tertiary hospital is the ideal one, and I must put on records that there have been our own members like Dr. Vidya Tobi and Tilottama who've been keeping on updating us about two COVID positive antenatal patients in the mild category. They're just under observation. They are not deteriorating. They're doing good. Whereas the other, like Dr. Sudha from Hassel, for example, has been giving us very useful inputs in how the multi-speciality team actually manages these.
So we
are thankful to all our colleagues who are constantly sharing their experiences. The supportive therapy for these patients are rest, oxygen supplementation, cautious and careful weight management, nutritional care, because you have to build up our immunity to fight the disease. Paracetamol for fever is an easy thing for an obstetrician to do. Steroids, mostly it is steroids for pulmonary maturity of the baby. No pluses or minuses here. You may anticipate a preterm, especially when the fevers are spiking, or you may need to intervene at 32-34 weeks because the patient is deteriorating. Maybe you will give a better chance to the baby with the steroids, but this has to be in consensus with the intensive care team who will guide you to what to do, what not, what is better for in the interest of the patient. Antibiotics, antihypertensives. Also, what do these intensive care specialists do in such a critical case? Yes, they will look at the respiratory rate. If it's more than 30, oxygen saturation less than 93, FiO2 less than 300, or the repeat chest X-ray showing a rapidly progressing lung lesion. They have to do a quick sequential organ failure assessment score, QSOSA score, which is required to make decisions for aggressive treatment. What does this score contain? Each of these points score 1. If the respiratory rate is more than 22, mental status is altered, or systolic blood pressure is dropping, it is 1, 1, 1. So if any of these two points are positive, then you will need to be more aggressive. And what is that aggressive care? I think at this point in time, we only manage the obstetric part from a distance and let the intensive care specialist and ICU expert handle this. The approaches for the viral infection itself, the COVID-19, there are two streams. One is hydroxychloroquine and azithromycin combination. The other is the antiviral group of drugs. This is what is given in the FOXI GCPR recommendations. There is a 10-day regime, a 5-day regime, a 7-day therapy based on some studies done elsewhere in the avoid. Nothing is proven and nothing is mandatory. Antiviral therapy with leponavir or ritonavir, which may be expensive, not available. Maybe it will help or may not. So the status of these we really don't know. So intrapartum care, this is where the major problem comes. Electronic fetal monitoring, because you can study the heartbeats from a distance and you don't have to go close to the patient. Delivery should be preferably in a tertiary care. And very few people. The patient absolutely has to wear a mask because this in itself may be an aerosol generating process. This is where our difficulties come. If we have to tackle every patient as being COVID-19 positive or a suspect, without testing or without any other kind of confirmation. Remember, I said have a high degree of suspicion. Well, unless proved otherwise, if you take her as COVID positive, then necessarily in her labor, you have to appear like this. The entire team has to wear the PPE and the threshold for plunging into a C-section, especially in small nursing homes, is very low. Because do remember for a C-section, if you don and doff the PPE, it's a matter of doing it for 30 or 40 minutes, and most of us can manage that. But if it is hours together of labor, then it's ideal that this patient delivers in a dedicated COVID hospital, because there is a lot of things around this which it will be impossible for smaller nursing homes. In the interest of the patient's safety, you must counsel her to a higher center. So this is what, if we have to presume that every case is a COVID suspect unless proved otherwise, dear friends, this is how the scenario in your labor room should be. We promote birth companion, but not in this case. The husband appears on the video screen there. That's the best. That's the closest that we can reach to her. The PPE, goggles, mask, gowns and gloves is a must, and the patient also absolutely has to wear a mask. The neonatal resuscitation or even receiving the baby has to be done at a safe distance. Quickly take away the baby from the mother. At least the 2-meter distance should be managed, and the PPE for the neonatologist is also a must. So all of these, as you can quite imagine, can be a huge challenge on a day-to-day basis. That's why the red line at the bottom, the new inclusion of testing all the patients in labor or when they are nearing term, then you know the status of that patient and the protective environment, even if it is a bit diluted, the chances of any kind of infection transmission will remain minimal. So an individualized decision has to take based on the obstetric situation. If the woman is deteriorating, emergency call for a C-section may have to be taken. Regional, that is epidural or spinal anesthesia, is the ideal. And whenever the operative procedure is advised, needless to say that it should be done wearing a complete PPE. For non-urgent C-sections, when the regional anesthesia is given, please wait outside the operation theatre until the block is effective. Don't go and crowd there. All the staff in the theatre should enter only after the regional block is effective. The reverse is true for general anesthesia. If for some reason that a GA has to be given, please be present there with your full PPE so that you can get into action as quickly as possible. Again, the neonatal resuscitation with all these barriers, you can try to imagine that this is not a scene which is easy and possible everywhere. Donning doffing area, the postnatal management with the mask and hand hygiene, the etiquette where the mother and the newborn may be roomed in together, but at a distance of 3 to 4 feet from each other. The cradle should be kept away. The breastfeeding with express breast milk is also another option, but whoever gives her this express breast milk should be a healthy caregiver. And if the mother herself has to do it, please ensure that she wears a mask and the hand hygiene is maintained. If she has suddenly appeared and you have sent for COVID testing but the results are still awaited, After you get the results, if it's negative, of course, you are relieved and so is the patient. But if it's positive, whether to test the infant immediately post-delivery or not is something for consideration. With all this, you can quite imagine both the hospital staff and the team and the patient and her family need a lot of psychological support and the stability to handle the uncertainties and the crisis. Please take care of your medical staff who have been exposed unexpectedly without appropriate PPE. Please keep them off for self-isolation for 14 days, and you have to make sure that they minimize the contact with other patients in the hospitals and colleagues, and each and every day you must monitor the temperature and the symptoms of your own staff, because if you suspect that they may have got the infection either from home or from the hospital, they will be put up for testing. There is a new recommendation of the use of hydroxychloroquine for the healthcare providers, but it is to be taken at the discretion of a physician consult. Statewide COVID-19 training action plan is what we are plunging into, because we want to train the entire health cadre in our state for them to follow the additional hygiene and social distancing procedures, for the correct use of PPE, for the baseline sensitization. There are many myths and misconceptions because of the rumors already in our staff. So you have to reassure and encourage them. How do we move ahead from there? We've just been discussing with the state authorities and KSOGA office bearers team as well that our next action plan should be to enact robust testing, tracing, coordination to more safely reopen our healthcare settings. If we have a strategy of a dramatic expansion of testing, we may need to do about 50,000 tests per week for pregnant patients alone who are going to be delivering in the next week, and those patients who present in labor. That is the scale of testing that we have to reach for our women, and an additional 1 million per month may appear because of so many cases of gestational diabetes and hypertension. So this is a huge challenge. We need to get these data together, put our resources in order so that we figure out our own way forward, and I'm sure that together we can do this. As of now, every patient should be treated as though she is a confirmed case of COVID-19. Universal precautions to be taken, every delivery, everywhere. Do not delay the obstetric management in order to test for COVID-19. So, the advantage of knowing the status of all women who are in labor, asymptomatic or symptomatic, or all women who are bound to deliver within the next week is by testing. What is the kind of test? How soon it will be available at our doorstep? How cost effective it will be? How much it will decrease the burden both to the families and ourselves need to be seen with your cooperation. So we urge everybody to download the Arogya Setu app and encourage the families to download the same as well, so that we can do the tracking effectively. Please fill in your data into the FOXI registry, and we are also collaborating at the FIGO level with a registry called the Priority, which means that everybody's data has to align in a uniform manner, so that we will be able to make some sense of the data that we are collecting to figure out our way forward. So yet again, as a closing statement of every of the speaker today says, let's fight against Corona together. This course is brought to you through KSOGA, through the Rajiv Gandhi University of Health Sciences, in collaboration with others and the FOXI and the FIGO and all the office bearers of all the organizations, not only in our nation, but also internationally, have expressed their intent to collaborate with us, because when it comes to women's healthcare and the volumes of deliveries that we handle in our country, the whole world is looking at us, not only in the way we are preventing and managing, but also how we submit our data for the benefit of the future generation. Thank you very much for your kind attention. We open it up to the chat box questions after the closing remarks and thanks by Dr. Dimakar.
thank all the doctors who joined for this excellent training of trainers proposing practice COVID-19 organized, arranged by RGHS along with the artist and Kasoga. First of all, I'd like to thank Dr. S. Sachidanand, Honorable Vice Chancellor of Rajiv Gandhi University of Health Sciences, for allowing us to conduct this program in this RGHS setup. And I thank other staff of RGHS, Dr. Mahendra, Dr. Hanumurthy, Dr. Dayanand, and IT department staff for conducting, arranging all this, making basic arrangements here. And first of all, we should thank our main speakers in this 1 hour. Dr. Shobhana Patel, President of Karnataka, KSOGA on the protocols and trials and testing. Dr. Kasturi Jonimat for Secretary KSOGA for needs for infection control practices worldwide. And Dr. Hemadi Walker, CEO and Chairman of Artist, spoke on antibiotic, intrapartum and postpartum handling of non-COVID as well as COVID positive patients. He's the one who is behind this program. She has arranged and conceptualized this program and make it happen this day in here. I thank all the others, members of our hospital and the artist and Kasaga members for helping us to conduct this program. We go to the question and answer session, and in the meantime, questions will come at between the addresses for a few minutes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Divakar. We start with the last question first. This is ICMR guideline says for pregnant COVID positive asymptomatic women, there's no need to give hydroxyquinoline or azithromycin. But the Foxy GCPR advises treatment for all positive women. Please guide. This is why I said there are conflicting reviews and reports. The Foxy guideline has only mentioned the HCQ and azithromycin, quoting that this 5-day course was given, the 10-day course was given in a small cohort of only 20 patients, which did not contain any pregnant women. But they showed some benefit. So these are very small studies, not well-controlled studies. We cannot lean upon them. The way the HCQ is being positioned for the patient treatment, it's going back and forth every day. And as on today, it is not recommended to be given unless she's you're helpless and you need to give her something. So you think that something is better than nothing. And in India, because many of us as OBGYNs have given it to so many patients with malaria, the confidence level of giving this drug HCQ is pretty much high because we are kind of in our mind convinced that it doesn't have any major side effects. Whereas for healthcare providers, they have said at your own discretion, take your physician's opinion, check out your ECG, etc. And then you can take it because it is deemed to be prophylactic. So yes, there is a clash in the recommendation, but the ICMR guidelines is more appropriate because they always look for robust evidence, and as on today, there is no such evidence for this. So if you have to give, you can give a 10-day, 5-day, 7-day course, just as also ran. You are never sure of how it would impact, but hopefully it will not adversely impact. And same with the antiviral drugs also. Do we regularly do COVID tests for all patients in the antenatal package, including gynecology? Well, we are even struggling to do the COVID test even in the symptomatic women as of now because really sending them to another place for a throat swab and making them wait 2 days in an interim place for actually deciding what to do with them till we get the report itself is becoming a challenge. I was just speaking to Dr. Shobhana today that the newer tests, which are also RT-PCR based, which will give us
the results in 5 hours, they are being validated, and it will become like a point of care test. If that is available, that is reasonably priced, well, whenever you think it is deemed necessary, you can go ahead and do. But as on today, the recommendation is only and only for those who present in labor and those who are at 39 weeks of gestation, and that to the RT-PCR test. We are not yet sure about the positioning of the rapid screening test. If they prove the test of time, as of now it's to be used for surveillance to identify how many positives are likely to be in one cluster. We should have designated hospitals is what Prema Kaujalagi is saying. Yes, and that is the attempt made by the government as well to actually have dedicated COVID hospitals, because with my deliberations you would have understood that if the patient is moderate or severe, which is a very small percentage, but that needs definitely a special care and a whole team. Madam, can we use azithromycin is the question? Some use it concomitantly with HCQ, and some will use it added only if there is a superadded bacterial infection as well. So that is what the recommendation says. But yet again, both HCQ and azithromycin are fairly commonly used drugs in OB practice. So if you give it, you may not be wrong, but there may not be a specific indication to give that. Are we supposed to use postnatal cases, PPE mandatory because she's positive now, and how to deal with the costs? Yeah, so that is why there are two situations. If you presume every patient can be COVID suspect or COVID positive because many of them are asymptomatic, then you have to use PPE then in every case. Okay? Which will not be possible. Please sensitize each and every one of your staff for a social distancing. They should not go close to the patient very often and for no reason. They should have a mask. Patient should have a mask. They should have a glove. Social distancing, repeated hand washing, glove and mask for both will save you through in most cases. How should ultrasound and CTG probes be sanitized? I would urge Dr. Kasturi to share the presentation which I had sent to her, where the details of probe cleaning with Sidex. Yeah, Kasturi, can you just respond to this question, please?
Can I?
Shobhana?
Kasturi is there?
Yeah, sure.
I can tell. Yeah. The problem with ultrasonography is when we do ultrasonography, definitely we are exposed for infection because we are doing for the longer period, and we recommend that AC should be on. But then the real fact is most of the machines what we use, they are all very temperature sensitive. So when the temperature goes up, the machine ultrasonography machine puts off. Okay, so it's not possible for any ultrasonography to do ultrasonography without AC. That's one question which has come there. Second thing, how to clean the ultrasonography probe? All the general thing, whatever we have told, holds in the ultrasonography room, whatever we have told, the hand washing etiquettes and, all those things, cleaning immediately after each patient and wearing that PPE and all those things. We are not talking about a complete PPE, we are talking about only the gloves and the mask. Okay, and then coming to the disinfection of the probe. Now, each company, now if you really look at it, I have a GE machine, and if you go to the website of GE, and they have a list of things, that they give, like how the probe has to be cleansed. And similarly, whichever machine you have got, ultrasonography machine, please contact your manufacturer before doing anything, using anything. One reason is because something goes wrong with the probe, they will not cover it with your CMC. They will say because you have used that, it has gone wrong, so they may not. That is one practical thing. Secondly, in general, I will tell you what all can be used. 75% alcohol can be used. 70% isopropanol can be used. 0.5% hydrogen peroxide can be used, and 2.7% glutaraldehyde can be used. This we can share it with all of you. That slide is there. We can share it with all of you. Then you can it will be
Yeah, thank you so much. She's done a whole thesis on this ultrasound probe cleaning, because right from the day we first discussed about that, we've been discussing with each other. Some recommendations are
I've been writing to this company and asking them, everybody is playing very safe, and they say that and all that. So this is how it stands. I think definitely we have to take precautions, and then we should go ahead and do.
Yes.
Then one more question, like it has come very, very commonly. This question comes like, whether N95 can be reused. Now, I don't think Sachidanand sir is there, and I think he has left already. This question comes again and again. And how to find out whether it is a good N95 mask or it's a fake. So now you should look for this seal, which is called as NIOSH, NIOSH. Now, if the mask has got this C, that means it's a genuine N95 mask. So NIOSH stands for National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health. Any mask which has got the C, that means it's a genuine mask. And also we have different variety in that FFP1, FFP2. FFP2 is N95. So that is what we need to understand. Generally, the manufacturers say N95 should not be reused. Okay, this is a manufacturer advice. But then if you look at Ministry of Health and Family Welfare website, and they have a webinar series where Ministry of Health and Family Welfare itself, they have released a webinar series and how to disinfect N95 in AIMS protocol. They say they have 5 masks, and somebody has already written in the chat that they have 5 masks and they number it as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and they put it in the cover, and then we come back and reuse first day 1, second day, like this. But as it stands now, we really don't have a very clear clarity on how it should be done. But then even now, because there is a shortage, even FDA and US, they're all thinking of how we can reuse the N95. And one thing definitely for sure we can use is Sterad, is a plasma sterilizer. Plasma sterilizer, if you have, definitely we can reuse N95 mask.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. So two things. We are going to be sharing all the presentation and short video clips so that you can play and replay, and then just get your staff to properly sink it into their head. And also there was one question about how we are going to train the staff. Dr. Shobna and Kasturi Donimat are putting together a timetable for training every single afternoon, somewhere between 12:30 and 1:30. 60-minute session of a skill transfer. So everything will be demonstrated. Clusters of 10-15 nursing home staff will come onto the screen, and they will deliberate with us one-on-one and sort out all that. There have been a bunch of questions around the thromboprophylaxis. Would you give? Would you not give? Well, there was one line of thinking that this whole pathology may be something to do with the hypercoagulation, thrombins in the respiratory system, etc. So one prong was also towards thromboprophylaxis, which makes the severe case less severe. But it was not in the actual recommendations, and the thromboprophylaxis post-vaginal delivery or C-section, as how your institutional thromboprophylaxis protocols are there, as per the obesity score, etc. Those need to be followed as on now. Many people have congratulated for the interesting presentation, so I share the credits with Dr. Shobna and Kasturi as well. And the world is going to be different. Yes, they're asking how it's going to be different. And then I also asked particularly about the testing. If the patient is from a non-hot spot, then which is close to term, should be tested, should we not test? Well, the recent recommendations are if she is from a contact or a cluster, close to 1 week, which is going to deliver, or she is in labor, you have to test. How we are going to go about it with the RT-PCR, how we are going to coordinate with food, and with such a volume of delivery in the state, that is what we are trying to figure out, and that will definitely be our positive action forward. In the meanwhile, a place which is called not a hotspot today may become a hotspot tomorrow. So kindly be in touch with not only the Arogya Setu but also the websites which give us constant indication of which area the patient is coming from and how do you have to look at her. Now hotspot and non-hotspot, it is case-to-case basis. So somebody has said, Aishwari Durge has said, my taluka is not a hotspot. So we pray that you remain like that. and not turn into a hot pot. Then N95 mask with or without respirator. I think Shobana has very well covered it. And somehow the anywhere I skipped the prophylaxis. Quarantine protocols for the healthcare providers. Yes, if inadvertently they have come in touch with the COVID positive, then 14 days of quarantine. But please monitor their symptoms on a day-to-day basis. Even from home, you have to ask them to send a selfie as how they do it in the war zone of BBMP, and also telecall to find out the symptoms moving further. Okay, then yeah, I think that question of N95 was a Sushila Rani. If we can hit upon the correct kind of information and make a small video on that also, we hope to. We should tell us how to go about the testing. Yes, because the next main action point will be about the testing, which we on a war footing need to sort out. And I must also place on record that people like Dr. Jyoti GS, who are our champions, who are working in a COVID-dedicated hospital as in the Ramaya Hospital, will be very useful to collaborate with, to know their first-hand experiences. Any of you in any part of Karnataka, please join hands to support us for the data registries, which will set the way forward. Today, if 20 doubts are asked, and if the trends show a particular track, we can present this data on the table, speak to the policymakers, and try and make a scientific sense out of the data and see how we can move forward from there. That will be really crucial because the kind of volumes of women's healthcare and the delivery process that we in India have to deal with, many other parts of the world will not be able to give such a rich data. So let us make it our mission to contribute symptomatic, asymptomatic, COVID, non-COVID, comorbidities, outcomes, the treatment regimes, this, that, and the other, inclusive of the newer, the research setting, the plasma therapy, everything is coming to the forefront. So I think we will be running the race ahead of others in terms of information exchange. Any final comments from Dr. Shobana before I ask our respected and honorable Vice Chancellor, Dr. Sachidananda, to bring this wonderful session to a close. It is not enough to thank him once, so I say yet again, sir, thank you very much for this wonderful opportunity for us to reach our master trainers, champions, the OBGYNs right across Karnataka to say that we are there for each other, and we will do better and better as the time goes by. So one comment from Shobana, and I'll ask her to close the session. Shobana? Shobana should unmute and speak.
I would like to just thank Sachidanand sir and taking this initiative, and he has done such a wonderful job by connecting all of us. And I would also like to thank Hema for starting this initiative. And I thank all my Kasoga office bearers and all the people who have tuned in. And I think we should take up, there are many questions I can see here that, probably it may be a good idea for all of us to make an, question and answers, like, some sort of a booklet, some common question and answers regarding COVID. I think many of the questions are repeated. I think we should think about it. And I think I thank everyone. Thank you very much.
It's time to thank one and all for this lovely session that we had today. TOT program on protocols in practice of COVID-19 conducted by artists and Kasoga together, and also co-sponsored by Rajiv Gandhi University of Sciences. It's a very unique experiment. Wherein, we have called all the experts from private organization and the university also joining hands with them. This is the need of the hour, and all of us should get together and see that we fight together the corona menace that we are all in together. We are facing together. Now I understand that all the master trainers who have been trained today will in turn take up the responsibility of training other obstetrician and gynecologists, because how much ever we learn, COVID is throwing new challenges to us on day-to-day basis. It's a very dynamic disease. We are learning from it every day. So it is always better to be well equipped and try to be updated. Only then we can handle the situation much better. Not only in giving good service to the patient, but also protecting ourselves. This particular condition, disease is giving us scare because it can spread to anybody. We have seen that it has spread to many health workers, many doctors across the world, and for whatever reasons, we have lost lives. That should not happen. We should be more prepared, well prepared to face this condition. Stick to the guidelines, and follow the guidelines strictly. Only then we can achieve whatever we are trying to achieve. Most importantly, overcoming the disease and also delivering the best services to the patients. And also, I would request all of you to take it up in good earnest and see that the program trickles down to the last mile. Every individual should be trained so that all of us are equipped very well. We can fight this disease in a better manner. So I could only say, together we can achieve all this. I request all of your cooperation and solicit your participation in this program and make this program, this artist and RGH's program success. I thank all the speakers today, especially Dr. Hema Divakar, Dr. Shobhana Patel, Dr. Kasturi Dhoniva, and Dr. Divakar for being with us and enlightening the crowd here. Thank you so much. And we are signing off from the studios of Rajiv Gandhi University of Health Sciences to meet again and to reiterate and update ourselves whenever it's necessary. Thank you so much. Thank you.